Welcome, Chef Chris. In the 4 years that I've worked with the Women's Heart Health Forum, this is the first time that we've asked a caterer to share a recipe with the group, and we're so happy that you said yes.
Well, thank you for asking. It's a pleasure being here.
In working with patients who have had cardiac events or who have risk factors for heart disease, we find they sometimes have difficulty transitioning to a heart-healthy way of eating. Some of the recommendations include eating more plant-based foods and reducing the amount of fat used in the food preparation. We also encourage them to use more herbs and spices instead of salt to reduce their sodium intake. I feel that your butternut squash recipe really reflects these recommendations very well. Could you show us how you did it?
Absolutely, it'd be my pleasure. For any kind of recipe, you really want to look at, take into consideration the things that take the longest to cook. And in this case, it's the butternut squash. You just want to cut it in half, and you can see the seeds, everything, the flesh right here. So basically what you want to do is seed it. Just spray it with the nonstick spray.
And can you tell us a little bit about why you're using the nonstick spray today instead of oil?
It's a lot more heart healthy. It's geared towards the message that we're trying to get across today with the food. Starting with the peeling of the butternut squash, you want to make sure you can see, you want to get all the way down to the orange part. Just going to cut them into discs. You want to get this in the oven right away because it'll take probably close to an hour in a home oven to roast properly. And then the cube squash, you just put it in a single layer like this on the sheet pan.
I like to see the butternut squash in the recipe. It has a lot of vitamin A in it, and it also has fewer calories than potatoes, which you find in a lot of traditional curry dishes.
Right, yeah, and it has that hearty texture. You just want to spray it with a nonstick spray, again, to help the caramelization process and the cooking. Throw this in here. It's going to take, the cubes won't take as long, but you can get it done and get it set off to the side because then you'll finish it later. The next ingredients that you want to get started is the garbanzo beans and the brown rice. The best rule of thumb when you're cooking garbanzos, there's actual amounts, in the recipe, but just like any other bean or legume, you want to make sure that the volume of water is roughly about 2 to 3 times in volume more than the actual grain. So when you put it on the stovetop, it's not only going to absorb, but it's going to evaporate too. So you want to make sure you have enough liquid in there. So that's for the garbanzos. And then for the brown rice, normally it's about 1 3/4 to 2 times, 2 to 1 on the brown rice for the ratio. And then keeping it just really simple, using just water with no salt or anything added to it, and get it on the stovetop, and bring both of them up to a simmer, and then reduce the heat and just let it go. The brown rice you can loosely cover, but the garbanzos you want to just kind of leave them uncovered.
And the garbanzo beans are a great source of protein to use instead of meat, and the brown rice was chosen to increase the fiber content, correct?
Correct.
So now that the rice and garbanzo beans are cooking, can you show us the next step?
Absolutely. So we have 2 ingredients here that I know a lot of people at home might be a little hesitant to prepare, or not. They may not know the actual right way to do it, but I'll give them a general idea today. One of the ingredients is ginger. The best way to peel ginger is actually with a spoon. Thinly slice it and then line it up like this, and then cut them into thin strips, and then turn it again and cut it into smaller pieces. Another vegetable that people tend to be afraid of is the onion, and it's actually really simple. You just want to nip off the ends like this, okay? cut the onion in half with the skin intact and peel it. The onion has lines going this way. Be careful and cut the opposite direction of those lines. Turn it and slice this way, and then slice it this way, and you have a perfect dice every time.
It's important to note too that both the ginger and the onion have a lot of antioxidants, which are compounds that help with heart disease and certain types of cancers.
That's good, because you know what? Onions and ginger, they're building blocks. They're major building blocks to any kind of cuisine that you're doing. What I have right here is Swiss chard. For this particular recipe, you're going to cut it into thin strips like this.
And would you use that stem for anything else if you weren't going to include it in the recipe?
You could. You make sure you wash it and spin it like you would lettuce, and you can chop this up in strips like this, and it adds actually a nice crunch. You can throw it into the sauté, which I like doing, especially for vegetarian dishes, because it adds more texture and a little bit of flavor to the dish. Fresh cilantro, just like any other fresh herb, especially basil, it's so fragrant and flavorful. You definitely want to be careful when you're using cilantro, because it can overpower the dish. Basically, when I use cilantro, I rough chop it. You want to be careful, because you can bruise the herb. So just roughly chop it like this, and you're done.
So can we talk a moment about the vegetables that you're chopping? So we've included dark green leafy vegetables, which are a part of a heart-healthy diet. The chard in particular has folate and vitamin K and potassium and vitamin C as well, so it's a very heart-healthy ingredient. So I'm glad you chose that.
Well, thank you. Now, earlier on in what we were talking about was substituting salt with acid and spices. Well, this is where the limes come into play to finish the dish. I prefer limes in certain dishes because the actual acid level and the overall flavor is more intense than, say, using lemon. And when you're doing a curry dish with all those big flavors with the curry powder and all that stuff, limes tend to work a lot better.
And it's going to give us some vitamin C too, so that's excellent.
Right. So, I have just a squeezer. You can use your hands, or you can use one of these to get your fresh lime juice out of. As you can see, I pulled the diced squash out of the oven, and now I'm about to pull out the whole roasted out of the oven. Be careful, it's really hot. Now, if you can just look around the edges, you see all the roasted, the natural sugars that are bubbling up. That's one of the benefits of roasting squash. It really concentrates the natural flavors of the squash. Scoop the pulp out. You can see the color of it and the natural creaminess of it. It doesn't need much help. A lot of flavor in this squash without even any salt.
So Chef, this is another example where you use the spray oil instead of adding other oil to the pan to help cut back on the fat in the recipe, correct?
Correct.
And do you have any tips for using the spray oil instead of the oil to keep it from sticking in the pan?
I'm using this non-stick pan to help in the process, because it does the lack of using, say, olive oil or canola oil. It is a little bit more challenging to keep it from sticking to the pan, but if you use a non-stick, then it works better. And then, as you can see right there, I just added the curry spices to the mix. You want to do that because it really helps bring out the flavors of the curry. And if you find that it looks a little dry, then what you can do is add just a little bit of the vegetable broth to it and let it cook down a little bit.
And the curry powder has a lot of those antioxidants we were talking about earlier as well, with the different spices that are added in there.
Right, exactly. So from this point, all the spices have been toasted, and what I'm going to do is add the butternut squash.
This was a pureed one.
This was the pureed one. Butternut squash is it's a lot like you're working with a sweet potato or a potato. It takes a lot of liquid to soften it up. We're going to move over here to this pan right here. We're going to start off with a little bit of nonstick spray, and we're going to add the roasted squash from earlier, okay, and the chard that we cleaned earlier. Move it around, and you're going to want to add just a little bit of the vegetable broth to help it steam. For this recipe, we're using non-fat Greek yogurt instead of coconut milk. The non-fat Greek yogurt is a nice substitute because it adds that mouthfeel and that tang, that little bit of that tang on the backside when you taste it.
Without having the saturated fat.
Right, correct. First thing you want to start off with is the brown rice. And the brown rice goes right down first, like this. Followed by the butternut squash, the curried butternut squash, which now includes sautéed onion and ginger, along with our chickpeas and a little fresh lime juice. And then as a garnish on top is more roasted butternut squash with the chard on top. So it actually gives it a little bit more texture, and the color of the chard gives it a little bit better, nicer presentation. And garnish it with the fresh cilantro, and that's it. That is the dish.
Well, it looks and smells wonderful. I'm going to give it a taste. The texture and taste is incredible. Thank you so much, Chef Chris, for sharing your time and your talent with us today and showing us that heart-healthy meals can be tasty and beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.